Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. This week, we had a first for New York, but a first for the country as well. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from Brooklyn, will be the first black person to lead a major party in either chamber of Congress. Democrats chose him this week as their leader in the House, next year when they'll be in the minority. It's the first time someone from New York has led a party in the House since World War II. And with Senator Chuck Schumer as majority leader in the U.S. Senate, it's the first time ever that two New Yorkers will simultaneously lead a major party in Congress. And both Schumer and Jeffries got their start right here in Albany in the State Assembly. Here's Jeffries from this week.
We look forward to finding opportunities to partner with the other side of the aisle and work with them whenever possible. But we will also push back against extremism whenever necessary.
Let's get into that and more with this week's panel. Michael Gormley is from Newsday and Zach Williams is from the New York Post. Thank you both. Thank you. So Hakeem Jeffries is a very interesting character because I almost feel like it was like New York's worst kept secret that he was on the up and up. You know, like I feel like whatever we've talked about him in the past few years, it's been, oh, that's the next Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries. And everybody else in the country was like, who's that guy from Brooklyn? Mm-hmm. Mike, what's your impression of him?
Well, we covered him for 3 terms when he was in Albany in the Assembly. Yeah. And what they're talking about now about Hakeem Jeffries is really the same thing that we knew back then. Very smart guy, very personable, but also a hard-edged politician. I mean, he went into the Assembly after losing a very nasty fight, and that's the great education for a politician. So he's a guy who can bring people together. He still has the progressive credentials that he's going to need to keep the progressives in line, but he's also close with establishment Democrats, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. So he's probably what the Democratic Party needs now: a young guy who can bring people together and hopefully go into a different direction for them.
I think you're exactly right. I think that he has an energy that the party is seeking right now to bring more voters, especially younger voters, into the fold, and in their hopes, support them in 2 years. Hopefully a better election for them that time. Zach, what do you think of him?
I think to a significant extent we're seeing an update of Nancy Pelosi, but in the form of Hakeem Jeffries. He's younger, he's Gen X, I believe, or maybe an older millennial.
I think
but definitely
Gen X.
Right on the border, right?
He's 52.
But we're going from a House leadership that is led exclusively by people in their 80s to one where they're now in their 40s or 50s. So Hakeem Jeffries really represents that. I think he also represents, black voters, the backbone of the Democratic Party, and of course he'll be the first black man to lead any congressional conference in United States history. One other thing I would like to add is it's a big day for Brooklyn yet again.
Yeah.
They have the U.S. Senate Majority Leader, they have the Mayor of New York City, they have, and now they have the House Leader on the Democratic side at least.
It's so strange because I feel like when people think of New York City politics, like who aren't in New York City, I feel like they go immediately to Manhattan. But Brooklyn is very interesting. We don't have to get into it, but the Brooklyn Democratic Party in particular is apparently a mess, according to people there. So I think that that's really interesting.
But a lot of votes. Last 10 years,
yes.
The power has been really shifted to Brooklyn. Yes, you're right. You're right.
Exactly. And I was doing some reading on Hakeem Jeffries, preparing for this, a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I'm not going to say all of it. He went to Binghamton University, which I found very interesting because he got a degree in political science there. I'm from Binghamton, and I did not realize it was a strong program. That's kind of cool. You talked, Mike, about the first time he ran for assembly in 2000. It was a nasty race. And then in 2002, when they had redistricting, which feels like a bad word to say now, his home was drawn 1 block outside of his opponent's district. Of course, they denied that it was for that purpose, but it's just interesting. He's also considered a centrist. You mentioned it a little bit, Mike, but do you think that he is the person to kind of reach across the aisle over these next 2 years as Republicans take control of the House?
Well, he's been able to do that. And I hesitate to say in the environment in Washington that he's going to make great inroads with Republicans. But really what he has to do is to make great inroads with between the progressives and the establishment Democrats. And he can definitely do that. He's been doing that his whole career. But he has also had support of Republicans in the past. I mean, he has some real skills. and he doesn't have the baggage that Speaker Pelosi has had.
Yeah.
One thing I would add just on that point is Nancy Pelosi has almost become a black hole of criticism from the political right for 20 years. You know, you go through all the campaigns, everyone's campaigning against Nancy Pelosi, and I think she really understood as leader that it was important for her to kind of take the criticism so that maybe some of these vulnerable members could win tight races, say, hey, they're criticizing leadership, but still stay in the good graces of voters. Now, we'll have to see what happens with Hakeem Jeffries. My gut instinct is that he will try to emulate Nancy Pelosi in that instinct, but in that way, but there are some parts in his history where he's made comments that have been very provocative, despite his overall aggressively boring persona.
Is that how you describe him? Because I don't know anything about him. I've never seen him speak on the floor. I've never seen him at a press conference because he's down in Brooklyn, obviously, and I'm in Albany. How do you see his vibe, I guess?
Well, he's as Michael said, he's very calm, very put together, and I think he chooses his words very carefully, even when it might not appear so. Two examples that come to mind. I was just reading about this earlier. He was one of the rare Democrats in the 2020 campaign who lent some credence to the idea to accusation of sexual misconduct against Joe Biden. Now that was then. This is now. Maybe his mind has changed on that, but I think that is notable because he's not someone who just says things like certain politicians because they come into his mind. He chooses his word carefully. And if you go back a couple more years, you might recall something alluding to how Donald Trump was wearing a certain cape, white, like a sheet, and maybe that represented alleged racism within the administration. So I think the point I'm making here is that he's someone that will certainly step into the limelight when he thinks it furthers his politics. But overall, I think he's going to play nice within his conference, really bridge those gaps between progressives and moderates, and probably work with Republicans when they can. He has noted that bills like the CHIPS bill passed with Republican support. That said, I doubt him and Kevin McCarthy are going to be buddy-buddy by any means.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be besties, but it'll be interesting to see.
That's an excellent point. And what that does is it leaves kind of a trail of people that if you're a progressive, you can find a way to like Hakeem Jeffries. If you're a moderate, you can find a way to like him. And that's the needle he's threaded that needle through his career.
Right. He did write a bill that was passed in 2010, signed by David Paterson at the time, that banned police from compiling a list of names and addresses of people that were stopped and frisked, which I found interesting. Definitely more on the progressive side of his identity. We have about 2 minutes left. I want to touch on this, but we don't have to get too into it because there isn't a decision yet. Joe Percoco was, and I'm going to give a little bit of an explainer to our audience. Joe Percoco was a top aide to former Governor Andrew Cuomo. He was charged by former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Manhattan, Preet Bharara, with federal corruption charges for essentially accepting bribes for a state project. So this case has been appealed. It's now at the Supreme Court. Mike, were you able to listen to the arguments? Yes, you were. So what's your impression? A lot of people are saying that it looks likely the Supreme Court is going to toss that conviction.
I think there's a good possibility of that, and I think you followed it more closely than I have. But the federal judiciary has always been perplexed by the way Albany works. I mean, we're perplexed by it too. So it comes down is that if someone is hired who's close to a politician who can act on a state contract, is that bribery or is it lobbying? And that's kind of the argument here. And in Albany, that line is so blurred.
Yeah. I mean, what I read of the arguments was one of the justices has basically said, where's the line between what Joe Percoco was doing while he was not working for the administration, he was working for former Governor Cuomo's campaign in 2014. Where's the line between him accepting money during that time and a lobbyist accepting money, or an advocate?
Well, prosecutors were arguing that he had a fiduciary duty because of his former role in the government and his assumed future role in the government, which did happen again. Right. But he was out working for the Cuomo campaign for several months. But he still had access to official channels in many ways that an ordinary lobbyist would not. He was allowed access to government meetings. He still worked out of the governor's official office. the big picture here that was so interesting with members of the Supreme Court was that they seemed inclined to agree with the merits of his specific appeal, while remaining concerned how might this curtail federal bribery investigations in the future.
Right.
Because again, not a lot of cases aren't about people just taking an envelope of money or something that's like an obvious quid pro quo. Sometimes it gets much more murkier, and if and when SCOTUS overturns this conviction, it could be even more narrow still. And that could really limit how the federal government can act in bribery cases at the state level in absence of state enforcement that maybe they feel was lacking.
Right. Precedent, precedent, precedent. When
Exactly.
we're talking about courts, that's what it comes down to. We do have to leave it there, unfortunately. Zach Williams from the New York Post and Michael Gormley from Newsday, thank you both so much.
Thank you.